When I saw my granddaughter's arms that evening, I dropped the groceries right out of my hands. The milk carton split open, spreading wide across my kitchen floor like spilled tears, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Her sleeves were rolled up, her skin covered in cruel marker words. Monster, fire girl, don't touch, written in thick black permanent marker that looked like wounds against her already scarred flesh. She sobbed, "Grandma, they did it again." The rage that filled me in that moment. God forgive me, but I wanted to burn down that entire school. I wanted to find every child who had ever looked at my Lila with anything but kindness and shake them until they understood what real pain looked like. But I swore right then, standing in that puddle of milk with my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, that I would find whoever did this. I would make them understand. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I faced the bully's mother. Nothing in my 73 years of living, of losing, of fighting, could have prepared me for the moment she saw my granddaughter's scars. She turned pale, her hands trembling like she'd seen a ghost risen from the grave, and then she whispered words that still echo in my mind like thunder after lightning. "Those scars, they're mine." You want to know what happened next? You want to understand how a grandmother's love can move mountains and expose truths buried deeper than cemetery stones? Then listen close, because this story will leave you speechless. Let me tell you about my Lila first. She's 12 years old now, but she carries herself like someone who's seen too much, lived through too much, survived too much for someone whose life should still be filled with nothing but playground laughter and bedtime stories. Those scars on her arms, they're not just marks on her skin. They're the only proof I have left that my daughter tried to save her baby girl when the flames came calling. The fire took everything from us 7 years ago. My daughter Sarah, my son-in-law Mark, their little house on Maple Street with the yellow shutters that Sarah painted herself because she said yellow was the color of hope. The only thing that fire couldn't take was Lila, and even then it tried. Oh God, how it tried. The flames licked at her arms as the firefighters pulled her from that inferno, leaving marks that would brand her forever as a survivor. But you know what? Those scars never defined her. Not to me. When I look at my granddaughter, I see her mother's eyes, deep brown like coffee beans, always searching, always wondering. I see her gentle hands that draw pictures of butterflies and rainbows, creatures and scenes so beautiful they make my old heart sing. I see the way she hums quietly to herself when she thinks no one's listening, little melodies that float through our house like whispered prayers. Every night, she comes to me before bed, and I hold her close, and she whispers, "I love you, Grandma," and in that moment, the world is perfect. The scars don't matter. The pain doesn't matter. Nothing matters except this child who survived when she shouldn't have, who loves when she has every reason to hate, who smiles when she has every reason to hide. Life had been peaceful for us. For 7 years, we built a quiet, simple existence together. I homeschooled her until this year because I wanted to protect her, wanted to keep her in our safe little bubble where no one could hurt her, where no one could make her feel different or damaged or less than perfect. But she begged me to let her go to regular school. She wanted friends. She wanted to be normal. God help me, I wanted that for her too. So this year, I enrolled her at Riverside Middle School. It's a good school, or so I thought. Good reputation, caring teachers, small class sizes where every child gets attention. I thought it would be perfect for my Lila. I thought she was ready. Within a week, the laughter began. It started small, like all cruelties do. Whispers in the hallway when she passed. Stares that lingered too long on her arms when she reached for her books. Kids pulling their sleeves down and nudging each other, pointing, giggling behind their hands like her pain was entertainment. Then came the pictures. Oh yes, in this digital age where children carry cameras in their pockets, someone thought it would be funny to take pictures of my granddaughter's scars and post them online. Pictures with captions like Freddy Krueger's daughter and burn offering. Pictures that spread through social media like wildfire. How's that for cruel irony? Every day she came home smaller, quieter, like she was trying to disappear into herself. The bright, curious child who used to chatter about her drawings and her dreams began to speak in whispers. The girl who used to dance around our living room started walking with her shoulders hunched, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. And every night, every single night, I heard her praying through the thin walls of our old house. Please God, she would whisper, please don't let them notice my arms tomorrow. Please let them see something else. Please let them see me. Do you know what it's like to hear your granddaughter pray to be invisible? Do you know what it does to your soul to watch a child who has already survived the unthinkable get torn apart piece by the casual cruelty of other children? I wanted to storm into that school. I wanted to demand justice, protection, consequences. But Lila begged me not to. It'll just make it worse, Grandma, she said, and the resignation in her voice broke my heart all over again. They'll say I'm a tattletale on top of everything else. So I waited. I watched. I held my tongue and my temper, and I waited for it to stop on its own. Because surely, these children would grow bored and move on to some other target. Surely their parents would notice and put a stop to it. Surely the teachers would intervene. I was wrong about all of it. That Tuesday afternoon, I'll never forget it was a Tuesday because that's the day I usually do my grocery shopping. The day I buy the special chocolate chip cookies that make Lila smile. That Tuesday changed everything. During art class, while the teacher stepped out for just a moment, just one moment, 3 children surrounded my granddaughter's desk. I know their names now, burned into my memory like brands: Tyler, Madison, and Kaylee. 3 children who decided that looking at Lila's scars wasn't enough anymore. They needed to add their own marks. They held her down, this tiny 12-year-old girl who weighs maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, and they took permanent markers, thick black Sharpies, and they wrote their hatred directly onto her skin. Over her scars. Over the marks left by fire and trauma and loss. Monster, across her left forearm. Fire girl, down her right. Don't touch, in capital letters where the worst of the burn marks cluster near her wrist. They wrote their cruelty on my granddaughter's body like she was nothing more than a bathroom stall, a place to scribble their poison and walk away. Lila hid it all day. She pulled her sleeves down and kept them down, even though it was warm, even though she was probably burning up inside those long sleeves. She didn't tell a teacher. She didn't call me. She just endured, the way she's learned to endure everything else. When I picked her up from school that afternoon, I noticed she seemed quieter than usual, but I thought maybe she was just tired. It wasn't until we got home, until I was putting away the groceries and she was helping me, reaching up to put a box of cereal on the high shelf, that her sleeve rode up just enough for me to see. The word monster in thick black ink, written over skin that was already marked by flames. That's when I dropped the groceries. That's when the milk exploded across my kitchen floor like a bomb going off. That's when my granddaughter broke down and told me everything. Grandma, they did it again, she sobbed, and she rolled up both sleeves to show me the full extent of what those children had done to her. They said I was already ruined anyway, so what did it matter? Already ruined. Those words hit me like physical blows. My beautiful, gentle, artistic granddaughter, ruined? This child who draws butterflies and hums lullabies and still believes in magic, ruined? The pain that ripped through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Worse than losing my husband to cancer. Worse than watching my daughter's house burn down. Worse than identifying bodies in a morgue that smelled like antiseptic and death. This was the pain of watching someone deliberately torture the most precious thing in your world and knowing you weren't there to stop it. But the pain, devastating as it was, only lasted a moment. What came after was pure, crystalline rage. You can mock me. You can call me names, spit on me, tear me down in every way imaginable. I'm old. I'm tough. I've survived 7 decades of life's cruelties, and I can take whatever anyone wants to dish out. But you touch my granddaughter? You hurt the child who carries my daughter's blood, who survived when my daughter couldn't, who represents everything good and pure that's left in my world. That's when the grandmother in me dies and something much more dangerous takes her place. I called the school immediately. My hands were shaking as I dialed, but my voice was steady when the secretary answered. "This is Eleanor Hartwell," I said. "I need to speak to Principal Morrison immediately about an incident involving my granddaughter, Lila Hartwell." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartwell, but Principal Morrison has left for the day. Can I take a message? You can tell him that children assaulted my granddaughter today. They wrote on her body with permanent markers. They defaced her burn scars. And if he's not in his office first thing tomorrow morning to discuss this, then my next call will be to the police and the school board." I was there when the school opened the next morning. I sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair in the main office, wearing my best dress and my late husband's brooch, the one he gave me for our 40th anniversary, shaped like a butterfly because he said I'd helped him transform from a caterpillar into something beautiful. I wore it for strength, for dignity, for the memory of a man who would have been just as furious as I was. Principal Morrison, a soft-looking man in his 50s with thinning hair and nervous eyes, finally agreed to see me at 8:30. He looked uncomfortable from the moment I walked into his office, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding eye contact. "Mrs. Hartwell," he began, "I understand there was an incident yesterday involving Lila and some other students." "An incident?" I repeated, my voice deadly quiet. "Is that what we're calling assault now? An incident. Now, let's not be dramatic. Children tease each other. It's unfortunate, but it's not uncommon. Kids can be cruel, but they don't always understand the impact of their actions." I stared at this man, this supposedly educated professional who is paid to protect children, and I felt my blood pressure rise to dangerous levels. "You call it teasing because it's not your child crying into her sleeves every night. You call it an incident because you don't have to scrub permanent marker off burn scars. You minimize it because it's easier than doing your job." He shifted uncomfortably. "I've spoken to the children involved. They've been given detention and detention." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "My granddaughter was held down and defaced like a piece of property, and you gave them detention? Would you give detention to someone who spray-painted graffiti on a war memorial? That's hardly the same thing, isn't it? Those scars are my granddaughter's war wounds. They're proof that she survived something that should have killed her. And your students treated them like a canvas for their hatred." Principal Morrison sighed, clearly frustrated with my unreasonable response. "Look, Mrs. Hartwell, I understand you're upset. But we have to be realistic here. Lila's differences, they make her a target. Maybe it would be better if she transferred to a school better equipped to handle students with special needs." Special needs. As if surviving trauma made her defective. As if bearing scars made her less worthy of basic human decency. I walked out of that office without another word, because if I had stayed one more minute, I would have said something that would have gotten me arrested. I walked out, and I made a decision that changed everything. I was done asking for help. I was done begging for justice. I was done expecting other people to protect my granddaughter when they clearly had no intention of doing so. I was going to handle this my way. That evening, I helped Lila scrub the marker off her arms with special soap and gentle patience. Some of it came off. Some of it didn't. Some of those words were etched into her skin now, faint but visible, like shadows of cruelty. "Grandma," she whispered as I worked, "maybe they're right. Maybe I am a monster." I stopped scrubbing and looked into her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that looked so much like her mother's. "Listen to me, Lila. Listen very carefully. Monsters are creatures that hurt innocent people for pleasure. Monsters are beings without compassion, without conscience, without love. You, my darling girl, are the furthest thing from a monster that this world has ever seen. You are kind when kindness isn't returned. You are gentle when the world is rough. You are beautiful not despite your scars, but because they prove how strong you are. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. Not yet. The next day, I found out there was a parent meeting scheduled for Thursday night. A general PTA meeting to discuss upcoming events and school policies. Perfect. I had no intention of scheduling a private meeting with the bully's parents. No, I wanted an audience. I wanted witnesses. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I researched the families involved, particularly Tyler Morrison, yes, the principal's son, which explained everything about his attitude. I learned about his mother, Catherine Morrison, a woman who sat on multiple charity boards and chaired the school fundraising committee. A woman who posted endlessly on social media about kindness and community values while raising a child who tortured other children. I also learned about Madison Porter's mother, Jennifer, a real estate agent who volunteered at the animal shelter and posted pictures of rescued puppies with captions about giving second chances to the wounded and abandoned. The irony was suffocating. And then there was Kaylee Sullivan's mother, Elena. This woman's social media was filled with motivational quotes about overcoming adversity and rising above challenges. She worked as a life coach, helping people heal from their past traumas. She had hundreds of posts about self-love and acceptance and finding beauty in your struggles. These women, these pillars of the community who talked endlessly about compassion and understanding, had raised children who thought it was acceptable to torture a little girl for surviving a fire. Thursday night came, and I dressed carefully. My best black dress, the one I wore to my husband's funeral, because I wanted to look like someone who understood loss. I pinned his butterfly brooch over my heart, where it caught the light and reminded me why I was fighting. I braided my silver hair into a neat bun and applied lipstick, red, like the flames that had marked my granddaughter. I arrived early and took a seat in the front row of the school cafeteria where the meeting was being held. Parents filed in gradually, chatting about carpools and soccer games and weekend plans. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that their children were learning to be cruel. Catherine Morrison entered with her usual confidence, perfectly styled blonde hair and designer handbag, smartphone already out to document her community involvement for social media. She saw me and smiled politely, the way you smile at strangers you might need to know later. Jennifer Porter followed, looking harried as always, juggling her purse and coffee and a stack of real estate flyers she was probably hoping to distribute. She nodded at me vaguely, the way busy people acknowledge the existence of others without really seeing them. Elena Sullivan was the last to arrive, and she commanded attention the moment she walked in. Tall, elegant, put together in that way that comes from money and good breeding. She moved through the room like she owned it, stopping to air-kiss friends and laugh at jokes I couldn't hear. When she spotted me, she made her way over. "I don't think we've met," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Elena Sullivan, Kaylee's mom." "Eleanor Hartwell," I replied, shaking her hand briefly. "Lila's grandmother." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or guilt, but her smile never wavered. "Oh yes, the new girl. How's she settling in? Why don't you ask your daughter?" Elena's smile tightened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Children can be challenging when they're adjusting to new situations. I'm sure everything will work out." "I'm sure it will," I agreed, and something in my tone made her step back slightly. The meeting began with the usual boring agenda items, budget discussions, upcoming events, policy changes that would be forgotten within a week. I sat quietly through all of it, waiting for my moment. Other parents checked their phones, whispered to each other, doodled on their notebooks. They had no idea what was coming. When Principal Morrison asked if there were any other concerns to address, I stood up. "I have something to share with the group," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "Something I think every parent here needs to see." I had asked Lila to come with me, and she had agreed, though I could see how nervous she was. She had been waiting in the hallway, and now I gestured for her to join me. She walked to the front of the room with her head down, her arms covered by a long-sleeved sweater despite the warm evening. "This is my granddaughter, Lila," I announced to the room. "She's 12 years old, and she's been a student here for 3 weeks. I want to show you what she's learning." The room fell silent. Parents looked uncomfortable, probably wondering what kind of scene I was about to make. Principal Morrison looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. "Lila," I said gently, "show them your arms." She looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly rolled up her sleeves. The effect was immediate and devastating. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another parent covered her mouth in shock. The burn scars were bad enough, raised, discolored patches of skin that told the story of a fire that almost won. But written over them in faded, but still visible permanent marker were the words that had been carved into my granddaughter's flesh by other children. "Monster. Fire girl. Don't touch." The silence in that room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, a heartbeat, a prayer. I let them look. I let them absorb the full horror of what their precious children had done. And then I began to speak. 3 children in this school held my granddaughter down and wrote these words on her body. They chose to add their cruelty to scars she received when she was 5 years old, when she survived a house fire that killed both of her parents. They decided that she hadn't suffered enough. Catherine Morrison's face had gone pale. Jennifer Porter was staring at Lila's arms like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. But it was Elena Sullivan's reaction that caught my attention. She had stepped closer, and as she got a better look at the scars, the real scars, not the marker words, her face went completely white. Her hands began to tremble. "Those scars," she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "What did you say?" I asked, turning to face her fully. Elena was staring at Lila's arms like she was seeing a ghost. Her designer composure had completely cracked, and tears were starting to well up in her eyes. "I know those scars," she said, her voice breaking. "I know them because I was there." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What are you talking about?" Elena Sullivan, this elegant woman who coached people through their traumas, this mother who had raised a child who tortured other children, began to shake like a leaf in a windstorm. 15 years ago, she whispered, I worked as a caregiver at Sunshine Children's Home. There was a fire one night. I was supposed to be watching the babies. But when the smoke started, when the alarms went off, I got scared. I ran. I saved myself and I couldn't save the baby in the crib. The world stopped spinning. The air stopped moving. Time stopped existing. That baby, I whispered, was my daughter. The silence that followed was so complete, so absolute, that I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Elena Sullivan, the woman whose child had tortured my granddaughter, was the same person who had failed to save my daughter 15 years ago. Sarah, Elena breathed, tears now streaming down her face. Her name was Sarah. She was 18 months old, and she had the most beautiful smile. I was supposed to protect her. I was supposed to keep her safe. But when the fire started, I panicked. I ran. I left her there. The pieces clicked into place like bullets sliding into a chamber. My daughter Sarah, left at the children's home when her teenage mother couldn't care for her. Sarah, who died in a fire while her caregiver fled to safety. Sarah, who became pregnant at 17 and died at 19, leaving behind a daughter who would bear the same scars as the fire that had claimed her mother. You, I said, my voice deadly quiet, you're the reason my daughter is dead. Elena collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I've lived with that guilt every day for 15 years. I became a life coach because I thought maybe I could help other people heal from trauma since I couldn't save her. I thought maybe I could make amends somehow. Make amends. The rage that had been building inside me for weeks finally erupted. You think helping strangers process their feelings makes up for letting my daughter burn to death? You think coaching people through their problems erases the fact that you left a baby to die? I was 19, she sobbed. I was just a kid myself. I was scared. And now your child is making my granddaughter pay for your cowardice. I roared. Your daughter, the child you saved by running away from mine, is torturing the only piece of my Sarah that I have left. The entire room was watching this confrontation unfold like they were witnessing a car crash. Parents who had come to discuss bake sales and field trips were now seeing the collision of past and present, guilt and consequence, cowardice and courage. Elena looked up at me through her tears, and I saw something break inside her. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know Lila was Sarah's daughter. I didn't know Kaylee was. God, what have I done? What have I raised? Catherine Morrison found her voice first. This is impossible. This can't be real. Oh, it's real, I said, turning to face her. Your son, Mrs. Morrison, your precious boy, held down a little girl who survived the same fire that killed her mother. He wrote monster on the arms of a child who escaped from hell. And you want to call it teasing? Catherine's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She looked at her husband, Principal Morrison, who was staring at the floor like he wished it would swallow him whole. Jennifer Porter stood up abruptly. Madison is never going near that girl again. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't want to know, I replied. It was easier to let your daughter participate in cruelty than to ask why a 12-year-old has burn scars. But it was Elena I focused on, Elena who held the key to everything. You ran from the fire once, I said, my voice steady now, controlled. But you can't run from what it left behind. Look at her, Elena. Look at what your cowardice created. Elena raised her head and looked at Lila, really looked at her, for the first time. She saw the scars, yes, but she also saw the gentle brown eyes, the way Lila stood close to me for protection, the quiet dignity of a child who had endured more pain than most adults ever would. She looks like her mother, Elena whispered. She is Sarah's eyes. She has her mother's strength too, I replied. The strength you never gave Sarah a chance to show. Elena stood up slowly, walked over to where Lila and I were standing, and dropped to her knees in front of my granddaughter. Lila, she said, her voice broken but sincere, I failed your mother. I failed her when she needed me most, and now my failure has hurt you too. I am so sorry. Lila looked down at this woman kneeling before her, this stranger who held the key to her family's tragedy, and her response broke my heart all over again. My mom forgives you, Lila said quietly. She told me in a dream once that holding on to anger is like holding on to fire. It just burns you up inside. Elena sobbed harder at those words of forgiveness from a child who had every right to hate her, words of wisdom from a 12-year-old who understood mercy better than most adults. What are you going to do? I asked Elena because this moment of recognition, this confrontation with the past, meant nothing if it didn't lead to change. Elena wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been resolve. I'm going to teach my daughter what real scars look like. I'm going to make sure she understands that some wounds come from surviving something horrible, not from being horrible. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. Words, I said. Just words. No, Elena replied, standing up with newfound determination. Actions. I'm resigning from the PTA effective immediately. I'm donating $50,000 to the Children's Burn Foundation. I'm volunteering at the Children's Hospital Burn Unit every weekend. And Kaylee is going to apologize to Lila in front of the entire school, and then she's going to spend her afternoons for the rest of the school year volunteering with burn survivors so she can learn what real courage looks like. Catherine Morrison found her voice again. This is all very dramatic, but nothing. Elena cut her off. Your son participated in torturing a child, and you want to minimize it. My daughter did the same thing, and I'm going to make sure she learns from it. The difference between us is that I know what it feels like to fail someone when they need you most. I won't fail again. The meeting ended in chaos after that. Parents filed out in uncomfortable silence, some shooting sympathetic looks at Lila, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Principal Morrison tried to approach me, probably to discuss damage control, but I walked past him without a word. Elena stopped me at the door. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, "I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But please let me try to make this right." I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity, for evidence that this was just another performance. But what I saw was genuine remorse, genuine pain, genuine determination to do better. "You can't bring my daughter back," I told her. "You can't undo 15 years of guilt and grief and loss. But you can make sure my granddaughter never has to endure cruelty from your child again." "I swear to you," Elena said, "Kaylee will never hurt Lila again. And if I have to move mountains to make sure Lila feels safe and welcomed at this school, then that's what I'll do." I nodded once and walked away, holding Lila's hand tightly in mine. The next day, everything changed. Elena Sullivan was as good as her word, maybe better. She arrived at school before classes started and found Tyler Morrison, Madison Porter, and her own daughter Kaylee. She marched them to Lila's classroom, and in front of 36th graders, she made them apologize. But it wasn't just any apology. Elena had done her homework. She had researched burn injuries, survival statistics, the psychological impact of trauma. She had armed herself with facts and figures and stories of courage. "My daughter and her friends wrote cruel words on Lila's arms," Elena announced to the class. "They wrote those words over scars that Lila received when she was 5 years old, when she survived a house fire that killed both of her parents. Do you know what the survival rate is for children in house fires? Do you know how brave you have to be to live through something like that?" She made Tyler, Madison, and Kaylee stand in front of the class and explain what they had done wrong. Not just, "we were mean," but specifics. "We held down a girl who had already survived trauma and added our own cruelty to her scars. We treated her like she was less than human because she looked different. We forgot that scars don't make someone a monster. Hurting innocent people does." Then Elena did something that surprised everyone, including me. She pulled up her own sleeves and showed the class the scars on her arms, not burn scars, but thin white lines that ran from her wrists toward her elbows. "I have scars too," she told those 36th graders. "I got these when I was a teenager because I was sad and scared and I didn't know how to ask for help. Some scars come from accidents. Some come from surviving terrible things. And some come from being so lost that you hurt yourself just to feel something. But all scars tell stories of people who lived when they could have died. All scars are proof that someone fought to stay in this world." The impact was immediate and profound. Children who had been laughing at Lila's differences suddenly understood that everyone carries wounds, visible or not. Kids who had been cruel started asking questions instead of making jokes. But Elena didn't stop there. She kept her promise about the hospital volunteering, and she brought Kaylee with her every weekend. They worked in the children's burn unit, reading to kids who looked like Lila, playing games with children who had survived fires and accidents and abuse. Kaylee learned that courage isn't the absence of scars, it's the decision to keep living despite them. The donation to the Burn Foundation was real too. $50,000 that funded research and support groups and reconstruction surgeries for families who couldn't afford them. Elena didn't publicize it, didn't post about it on social media for credit. She did it quietly, the way you do things when you're trying to heal damage rather than seeking praise. Catherine Morrison was slower to accept responsibility, but public pressure and the threat of a lawsuit eventually motivated her to act. Tyler was suspended for a week and required to complete 40 hours of community service at a center for children with disabilities. Principal Morrison implemented new anti-bullying policies with real consequences, not just detention. Jennifer Porter moved Madison to a different school entirely, claiming it was for a fresh start, but I think she was just too embarrassed to face the consequences of her daughter's actions. And my Lila? My beautiful, scarred, perfect granddaughter began to bloom. It started small. She joined the school choir, something she had always wanted to do but had been too self-conscious about. The first time she stood up in front of an audience and sang, her sleeves rolled up, her scars visible, her voice clear and pure as an angel's, there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. She made friends. Real friends. Kids who saw her scars and asked about them with genuine curiosity rather than cruel mockery. Children who included her in their games and their conversations and their sleepovers. Kids who learned that being different isn't the same as being wrong. She started drawing again, but now her pictures were different. Instead of hiding butterflies behind clouds, she drew phoenixes rising from flames. Instead of rainbows that disappeared behind mountains, she drew bridges that connected broken places. Her art became a celebration of survival rather than an escape from reality. And she began to talk about her mother. For 7 years, mentions of Sarah had been too painful, too loaded with grief and loss. But now Lila started asking questions about what her mother was like, what she enjoyed doing, what dreams she had before the fire cut her life short. "Tell me about when Mom was little," she would say at bedtime, and I would share stories about Sarah's laugh, her terrible cooking, her habit of singing off-key in the shower. We started building a bridge between past and present, honoring the mother Lila lost while celebrating the future she was creating. 6 months after that confrontation in the school cafeteria, Elena Sullivan approached me at a school function. She looked different. Older, maybe, but more genuine. The polished veneer had been replaced by something more authentic. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that I've been seeing a therapist. Working through my own trauma from that night 15 years ago. I realize now that I never dealt with the guilt of failing Sarah. I just buried it and tried to move on, which is probably why I raised a child who thought it was acceptable to hurt others." I nodded, not ready to forgive but willing to listen. "I also wanted to tell you that Kaylee has been asking if she can write a letter to Lila. Not an apology, she already did that. But a real letter about what she's learned from working with burn survivors. About how she wants to be different." "That's up to Lila," I replied. "Of course. I wanted you to know that this has changed us. All of us. What happened that night, what Kaylee did to Lila, what I did to Sarah all those years ago, it forced us to look at who we really were. And we didn't like what we saw." She paused, gathering courage for what came next. "I know I can never undo what I did to your daughter. I know I can never give you back those 15 years of grief and anger and loss. But I want you to know that Sarah's death has never been forgotten. It has shaped every day of my life since then, even when I was trying to pretend otherwise. And now, watching Lila thrive despite everything she's been through, I see Sarah's strength in her. I see what Sarah could have become if I had been braver." Tears were streaming down Elena's face, but her voice remained steady. "I failed your daughter when she needed me most. But I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure other children don't suffer the way she did. I will make sure Lila never faces cruelty from my family again. And maybe someday, if you can find it in your heart, you might believe that I'm truly sorry." I looked at this woman who had carried the weight of my daughter's death for 15 years, who had unknowingly raised a child who tormented my granddaughter, who had been forced to confront the consequences of her past cowardice. And I realized something that surprised me. My anger was gone. Not my sadness. That would never fully heal. Not my love for Sarah. That would burn eternal. But the rage that had consumed me, the fury that had driven me to seek justice and revenge, had transformed into something else. Something that felt almost like peace. "Elena," I said, using her first name for the first time, "you can't change the past. None of us can. But you can choose who you are moving forward. You can choose to be the person Sarah needed you to be 15 years ago." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying." "Then that's enough," I replied. "For now, that's enough." A year later, Lila stood on the stage at her middle school graduation, valedictorian of her class. She had written her speech about overcoming adversity, about finding strength in survival, about learning that scars don't define you, they refine you. Some people think scars make you ugly, she said to the audience of parents and teachers and fellow students. But I think scars make you real. They prove that you've lived through something difficult and chosen to keep going. They show that you're stronger than whatever tried to break you. She looked out at the audience, found my eyes, and smiled. My grandmother taught me that every scar tells a story. Some tell stories of accidents or illness or violence. But all of them tell the same ending. The person wearing them survived. They lived. They refused to give up. She paused, rolling up her sleeves so everyone could see the marks that had once made her a target for cruelty. These scars used to make me feel ashamed. I used to think they made me a monster. But now I know they make me a warrior. They make me someone who faced fire and won. The applause was thunderous, but what I noticed most was Elena Sullivan in the back row, tears streaming down her face as she clapped for the granddaughter of the child she couldn't save. Beside her sat Kaylee, now 13 and serving as a peer counselor for children with visible differences. Both of them were changed, transformed by the collision of past and present, guilt and grace. After the ceremony, as families gathered for pictures and congratulations, Elena approached us one more time. "Lila," she said to my granddaughter, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. How proud your mother would be of you." Lila smiled, no longer the frightened child who had been tormented for her differences. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. And thank you for teaching Kaylee how to be kind. She's been a really good friend to me this year." Elena looked at me over Lila's head, and we shared a moment of understanding. We had both been changed by this journey, both been forced to confront our own capacity for grace and growth. We would never be friends. Too much pain lay between us for that. But we had found something better than friendship. We had found forgiveness. As we drove home that evening, Lila turned to me and said, "Grandma, do you think Mom knows what happened? Do you think she knows about Mrs. Sullivan and Kaylee and everything?" I thought about that question, about the mysterious ways that past and present can collide, about how guilt and grace can transform enemies into allies. "I think," I said carefully, "that your mother knows you're exactly who she hoped you would become. Brave and kind and strong and forgiving. Even with the scars? Especially with the scars, baby girl. Especially with the scars." Today, 2 years after that confrontation in the school cafeteria, Lila is thriving. She's in high school now, president of the art club and a member of the debate team. She volunteers at the same children's hospital where Elena works, reading to young burn survivors and showing them that scars don't have to mean shame. She still has nightmares sometimes about the fire that changed everything. She still bears the physical marks of that terrible night when she was 5 years old. But she also has something precious and rare, the knowledge that she is stronger than anything that tries to break her. Elena kept her promises, all of them. The foundation continues to receive annual donations. Kaylee graduated from high school last month and is majoring in social work, planning to specialize in trauma counseling for children. The woman who ran from fire 15 years ago has spent every day since then running toward it, helping others heal from their burns. And me? I learned something I never expected to learn at 75 years old. I learned that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about transformation. Sometimes it's about giving people the chance to become who they should have been all along. Some scars don't fade, and that's okay. Some wounds never fully heal, and that's okay too. Because scars and wounds are proof that you lived through something that could have destroyed you. They're evidence that you chose survival over surrender, hope over despair, love over hate. Every scar carries a story, of pain, yes, but also of survival, of grace, of the mysterious ways that broken things can become beautiful. Some people hide their scars out of shame, afraid that their wounds make them less worthy of love. Others wear them proudly, knowing that their scars are proof of their strength. I used to wish my granddaughter's scars would disappear. I used to pray that someday she could look in the mirror and see unmarked skin, unblemished flesh, a body that didn't carry the evidence of trauma. But now I pray they never fade. Because those scars tell the story of a little girl who lived when she should have died, who loved when she had every reason to hate, who forgave when she had every right to seek revenge. Those scars are proof that fire didn't win. Love did. And in the end, that's the only story that matters.